So the decision is a 3-0 for the affirmative from San Antonio. So, yay. I ended up voting affirmative. I think the easy way to do that is sort of on the arguments on framework, where the attempt to utilize framework pushes out forms of knowledge that would otherwise be beneficial in order to help create a world that would not essentially stigmatize individuals as well as create a positive affirmation around sexuality. And so the attempt of utilizing framework as a way to push it out not only is violent, but then also gives solvency for the affirmative to begin to sort of change that situation. And I think that come the 2NR, the flip of what you did is a better strategy, because they try and get out of the critique by saying that they don't actually affirm a legalization of prostitution, and then their we meet on framework is more or less a lie. Like, they talk about prostitution, but they're not talking about it in the sense that's necessary for you to be able to get your links to capitalism, which makes it difficult for you to be able to spin that link story if your link story is only about the fact that they affirm prostitution. If you're going to go for capitalism, you should read other links like focusing on identity politics, trades off with a focus on capitalism, and so that way, even if they aren't dealing with prostitution in the sense that you're talking about, you can still have other links that could be relevant in the debate. And on the affirmative side, I would say that I would have spent more time going for the framework turns. If this was a prelim round, you wouldn't get exceptionally high speaker points, because while it's there, it's not like the crux of the debate. And I think that the 2AR should have made it more of the crux of the debate and made arguments about even when they don't go for framework, there should be reasons to reject them. I mean, they don't make arguments that says framework's conditional, but I would have liked to see more analysis on that regards. And I think that the 1AR should have extended more arguments than just the permutation on the critique. And you should read some evidence that, like, a focus on class is not sufficient to get at issues of, like, the way that race intersects with gender, especially in the way that you're talking about it, because it's not just a relation of capital. And I don't think that those arguments exist so much on the debate, and that would create independent forms of offense that you could go for in the debate round.
For me, similar to Joe and framework stuff, but more so on CAP. I think that CAP does not get at, like, the root cause of, like, psychic violence that they talk about and this whitewashing stuff. I think that makes your alternative kind of not able to solve for the stuff that they speak about. And they have, like, some diss ads on this idea of CAP, and I kind of vote for the permutation, because I think that it's not mutually exclusive to engage in their reimagining and it linked to CAP, because you don't get at to how CAP is able to address, like, the psychological or psychic stuff that they talk about, because that's kind of what's embedded in their affirmative as a prerequisite to a lot of their impacts. I kind of think that you should go for framework, but you need to have a much harsh defense of it. With going for, like, things like topical version of the act, like they could legalize prostitution with net benefit of, like, talking about reimagining this myth, possibly say that as a benefit to, like, Latina and Chicano communities, right? But they still can legalize prostitution that gives them access to some other form of safe ways of making money. I don't know, right? But I think the whole, the actual substance of the affirmative, I like it, and I've seen it in the past in a sense where my best friend, he canonized Lama Lecha and La Llorona.
That was our inspiration.
Yeah, and he's actually here. But, but I think that y'all should use more of your affirmative against framework and against CAP, and to talk, like, more on framework, to talk about the switch side debate stuff is kind of what makes you have to whitewash how you understand yourself and understand the world, because, like, you should be trained to defend both sides, which is the same type of psychological violence that you have to deal with like those dichotomous things. Also, I don't know, you can probably say that, like, framework is like a form of La Migra or something. I think that's, like, using those metaphors as much as possible towards framework is something that works in a really good way. But yeah, and decision-making skills, I think, because y'all were talking about survival a little bit, I think you should say like your survival stuff is a prerequisite to like decision-making skills, because if you don't like know how to survive in a particular,
Yeah.
you know, in the world as it is, like why does decision-making skills become important if like your decision-making skills are based in another set of skills that they want to impose
Yeah.
on you? But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I agree with both. I think that, so I think there's definitely something to be said for the negative strategy of running a very policy-oriented framework and then trying to use your K to demonstrate in-round abuse. But I think that it's a very limited strategy. I think it'd be good if you tried to also get links based upon the actual AF, right? So you have like prostitution stuff, but they're prostitution links that are not engaging with the sort of epistemological standpoint that they're trying to reorient themselves and the sort of power that they are able to harness to like use to confront Eurocentrism, right? That like there's a certain story line that they're telling about how prior to colonization, right, there was this other way of being that was possible, and then colonization happens, brings capitalism, right? Capitalism is predicated upon this. They're telling a pretty convincing story that going back and like imagining these myths provides some sort of resources to combat sort of, they didn't say this, but some sort of capitalist domination, right? And I think that there's plenty of stuff out there that says that sort of thing is insufficient, right? That and you could get like, you know, the identity politics stuff. You could get different multiculturalism sort of things. You could, you know, there's probably plenty of stuff about postmodernism and Ansel Dua's method that is insufficient to combat capital, right? This is just going to become, this whole reimagining of the myth is just going to be re-commodified, right? Oh, now you can buy like the new myth story, right? You know, like there's all sorts of great cards about how capitalism wants new stuff, right, to sell, right? And so you could say that, yeah, so fine, you reimagine things, and now we're just going to sell like, you know, we're going to sell art, we're going to sell, you know, Guadalupe the Whore t-shirts and Target sort of stuff, right, that kind of stuff. I really like the F. I really liked the framework arguments that y'all made. I think you could have you know, you could have really made much bigger deal about, I mean, framework stuff, which is what they all said, but yeah, I like the F.
Thank you.
I like it.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
What is the answer to this postmodernism stuff? Or where can I reference to, like about Ansel Dua's method?
Yeah, so I think that
Or what authors?
the answers to like Ansel Dua's postmodern, I think that what you have to do is really go like all in on, I think that you could play up the embodiment sort of stuff. Yeah, and how, and really try to find more stuff or try to extrapolate new ways to talk about how important it is to be able to harness the power of sexual embodiment. I think that if you bring the body into the debate a little bit more, right, along with the mythical imagining, I think that will at least mitigate some of the claims that criticize Ansel Dua's postmodernism. You could also go into, you could make more of, for example, Mignolio's critique of of modernity,
Okay.
right? You know, I don't really know for sure though
Yeah.
if the AF, even though you're all clearly, you know, using a lot of Anzaldúa, I don't know if you have to defend totally the postmodernism. I don't think that there's, you know, hearing it, the AF, listening to the AF, listening to the way that you're explaining the AF, I don't know if you're all even that postmodern.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, potentially, but I think that the way that you could at least mitigate it, if you don't want to go all in on postmodernism, is to bring the body back, because that's one of the big criticisms of postmodernism, is that you lose sight of the body, which is not true in the case of the AF.
So I found a card the other day that I haven't put in my file, but it says that in indigenous culture, which is what we're bringing back, it's like the spiritual was so tied up to the material
Mhm.
that any change was like, any change in either will like affect the other. So
Yeah, like
Will that be,
y'all are
like-
doing them in some ways. So the way that postmodernism is so often like described is that it's all about the fragmentation of the subject, and
Mhm.
y'all are almost doing the opposite here with your
yeah, okay.
with what the way that you're spinning the AF.
Okay.
Yeah, you could really play that up more, I guess.
There's also a lot of like pro-sex feminists who write about how they're able to reappropriate capitalism and able to utilize it against itself, right? And so because it becomes a very like on the streets way of taking capital and using it against itself. There's a book, Global Sex Workers by Kamala Kempadu and Joe Doesma, who they have chapters on sex workers that take place in different localities, that, like in third world situations, and how they're able to, while they're servicing first world clients, the way that they're engaging in this is not through a traditional, they don't view it as a traditional form of exploitation, and so that way when they say capitalism will exploit these women, it sort of assumes that the women who make these choices are duped into making the system, that they can't figure out how to do it as well. So the capitalist critique of things like prostitution assumes that women or men or queers or whomever who make these sort of changes don't have the agency to be able to navigate the avenues of capitalism. So that gives you offense against saying, well, capitalism just duped us, but also gives a way for you to sort of articulate how capitalism can be used against itself, opposed to this totalized image of capitalism.
Yeah, and I think that you can really like play up your psychic power argument to reaffirm a particular subjectivity that is rejecting the framing of prostitution,
Okay.
right? Like,
Yeah.
right, prostitution is the harm, right, and the
Yeah.
link to capitalism is that it's a reduction of the self to an object,
Yeah, to the
right? And your
self-
method, your epistemological method of bringing the spirit and psychic power and reintegrating it with the self and with the body, right? You can say this is combating the argument about reduction, right?
Yeah.
This is your binaries argument,
Yeah.
right? You are exploding the binaries between subject and object,
Yeah.
right? And their cap arguments don't account for that. They assume that a continuously split subject, and that you could only be, in order to engage in prostitution, you can only be an object,
Okay. Yeah. I understand. Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah. That makes sense. I always do that.
Do y'all have any questions?
Framework and have like what we have how to like verify that it's
I mean, there's a number of different like critiques that you could do of the act, but it's a question of like, what are you most comfortable with? Like, if you're most comfortable in capitalism, do a capitalist critique. I mean, you could use speciesism, You could use critiques of identity politics. Are ones that I think of off the top of my head that you can utilize. But I would say that the best strategy is use whatever criticism you're the most comfortable with, and then just create the link stories. And so sort of like the way that we had talked about how the links could be articulated based upon what they do, opposed to just like the topic area, would be the way to develop more nuance in order to win those arguments.
I also think that you could take more of the stance, you particularly, that engaging in like sexual revolution or whatever is probably not good for black women, like in the way that they are talking about it, because there are certain specificities in particular communities that would be dangerous for, and like it probably was not safe. Like there's like criticisms of like the slut walk, right? And there are criticisms from like I think it's Joy James's criticism, and is to talk about like those particular formulations of like sexual like revolutions or embracing these notions are not universal, and they shouldn't be applied when they talk about particular bodies. Now, of course, they might say that this is for us, or this is for her, but you need to say that you still allow for the political and social implications of putting that image out there to a wide range of an audience and debate community, which means that those things are not just going to be centered on like how you look at Latinas, but women in general. And like when you apply that to black women, it doesn't translate well or the same, right?
Will that be because of like the hypersexualization of? Okay.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But
how do we answer that?
You can answer it saying like, this is not a strategy for black women. This is a strategy for me. And like, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be selfish like that and say, I'm not saying that all like Latinas have to do this, but this is a personal survival strategy for me. I mean, this is when I was debating, our partner, we was like, we ran this like one argument about black liberation theology, and he said, well, all black people are not Christians. Like, so we're not talking about all black people.
Yeah.
We're talking about us and how this is a personal liberation for us, right? So I think you and you might link this to narcissistic politics, but so what? It's inevitable.
I think that another way to answer it, though, is to say that sure, the specificity of the story and the reimaginings are inappropriate to just move over to a different cultural context, but you could say that is a critique of white Western heteronormative patriarchy that has instituted the virgin whore dichotomy, right? That is also what affects black women. Right, and that at least you would, and then you could read like a perm and a solidarity argument, and
Can I also like as part of the offenses say something like seeing everything within a white black binary bad
Definitely.
kind of thing? Okay.
yeah.
You can also make arguments against the whole concept of virgin whore dichotomy, because it didn't start from like it didn't start from a Latina context. It started from like a white feminist context. I mean, but what else? I mean, it can be applied. But I mean, there are black women that make arguments against. There are black feminists that make arguments against the virgin whore dichotomy and how it is not sufficient as a tool for analyzing these type of issues. So I think even Shannara talks about that a little bit. Like just Google like black feminism and virgin whore dichotomy. I think Patricia Hill Collins talks about it a little bit. And like how those dichotomies change based on the racial context of who you talk about. So,
Yeah, it'd be pretty interesting. A mestiza debate versus Collins. That would be
We've been
Yeah.
afraid of
That'd
running
be-
into anti-blackness.
yeah, but they would go a whole different route. A whole different route. But there's also criticisms of mestiza as well. because there are some people that are like mestizas are the privileged class within the Latino community. Like they get favored and seen as like kind of like light-skinned black people.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there becomes a color complex because darker skinned Mexicans
So
do
it's
not
weird
get
because they're
this.
talking about darker skin, white females, so it's like very
Yeah. But I mean,
I guess you can also talk about like Afro-Latinas and how this.
that too. Yeah.
So there's a
Don't
lot of
get
factors
triggered.
in that, so.
But I mean, it's all about what you're willing to argue and have researched and things of that nature. Because, or you can even run a pick that picks out a virgin or dichotomy. I don't know. That would work some way. Good ideas. But yeah.
We're just like pulling things.
Well, thank you so much, Judge.